All right, power panel. Cenk, Uygur, Michael, Shure, Aida Rodriguez. Aida, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I just did a video promoting that I'm on the Young Turks, and I said Aida Rodriguez is going to be live on the Young Turks since they don't want us to use pronouns.
Okay, well there you
Sorry.
are.
I'm doing well.
Good. So Aida, of course, also the author of Legitimate Kid. You got to check out that book. A lot of books to check out. Michael, of course, a contributor for us as well. Great to have you guys. And I think I'm going to do the first story. All right, you guys ready? Let's buckle up.
Yeah, you can. I can now.
Oh, you can. You got it, Michael.
I pretty much have it. Let's see. We'll give myself a test on the first. But in any case, let's start with this video.
Hold on. I have a message. If you are a police officer and you are going to abide by unconstitutional bull, if you are a police officer and you are going to abide by unconstitutional bull, I want you to do me a favor right now and go hang yourself because you're a piece of shit. Go yourself.
Right, a lovely thing to say to police officers. We now know who that person is. That person happens to be the number 2 person in the Trump New Hampshire campaign. That was a January 6th video calling for police to kill themselves. And now we finally know who that person is. And I think it's important to point out before we get to their name and who they are and their history, that 5 police officers died as a result of the Capitol riots. 1 died by a stroke and 4 died by suicide in the days and weeks following those riots. Now, that person who that we can now name is Dylan Quattrocchi, and Dylan is we don't have full evidence that he actually entered the Capitol, guys. But we do know that he said that police officers who were abiding by this were being unconstitutional and should kill themselves. And then we look at old tweets from good friend Dylan Quattrocchi and his now suspended account. But back in 2021, WMUR News 9 obtained these tweets. Here's one: DC at the Capitol just got tear gassed, and this is clearly something he's proud of. Went on to say, "I'm bleeding for my country. You'll have to kill me to stop my hashtag fight for Trump." And then finally, and here's a good one, or not finally, but Mike Pence is a traitor to America, followed finally by this one that says, "We're not going to take it at the United States Capitol." And so, guys, this is a person now who we know is part of the Trump campaign in the very first in the nation primary state of New Hampshire.
We're at the Capitol. It just got stormed. I got a text message from one of my buddies saying that they locked all of the congressmen and senators and Mike Pence up. It's crazy. I heard people got tear gas. This is nuts. This is history. This is America. We love our president. Let's go.
Hire that guy is what somebody saw in that video and decided to do on the Trump campaign. Here's more about his role with the Trump campaign, Dylan Quattrocchi. Quattrocchi was an aide on the unsuccessful 2022 congressional campaign of Caroline Levitt, who now works for a Trump-aligned political action committee. Campaign finance records show that he began working for the Trump campaign in May and made $6,500 in June, the last month for which spending disclosures have been made available. And Quattrocchi has taken his job very seriously as Trump's number 2 because he's also taken to social media to show himself in a photo with his boss. So these are the kind of people that are on this campaign. We don't know if he's currently working for the campaign. WMUR, who showed us that video earlier, has reached out to Quattrocchi himself, asked him about his suspended account and those tweets. He said he's not allowed to comment and referred News 9 to a campaign spokesman. And News 9 has now spoken with the campaign that does not deny the authenticity of its post or Quattrocchi's presence at the Capitol on January 6th. This is what they said. President Trump's campaign values the hard work of its team to ensure he wins the New Hampshire first in the nation primary and takes back the White House. So we'll get into what the Trump campaign knew, what this says about the campaign, but what does it say to you guys when you see this is the kind of person on a day or during a week when people are being sentenced, going into a month where the most sentences are gonna happen for January 6th, this coming September, I guess we're here now. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, so in the old days, if you had someone who thought, it's not that big a deal if cops get killed and set it on tape, they would be fired instantly. And you would think that in a Republican campaign, they'd be fired even more quickly, at least historically, right? But no, these are new days. So Trump has basically destroyed a huge part of what was pretending to be the Republican agenda. So I don't know that the voters ever believed any of this stuff, like family values. Oh, we care a lot about family values, and then Trump, has porn star mistresses, etc. And they're like, we never meant it. We don't care at all. And in this case, blue lives matter. No, they don't. They don't matter at all. This guy wanted the cops to kill themselves, and by the way, a couple of them did. And Trump doesn't care at all. Apparently the Republican voters don't care at all. In fact, they want to defund the cops now. They want to defund the FBI. So what you meant was family values for you. In other words, I like to judge you, but not for me, because I don't want to be judged. And what you meant is cops to keep you down, but not me. I mean, I want to be able to do whatever I want and break the law. So, I mean, just 8 years ago, it would have been unthinkable that this guy wasn't instantly fired. But now it's the most normal thing in the world. And of course, I have one more question, which is, well, some of these guys are getting 17, 18 years. So the foot soldiers, I mean, are gonna get decades in prison. But meanwhile, this guy's the #2 in charge of New Hampshire, one of the most important primaries in the whole country for the leading Republican candidate. And the guy who organized the whole thing, Donald Trump, is he gonna get 17 or 18 years? Or do we just apply the law to non-elites? And so I don't ask that of Democrats anymore. I asked it for 2.5 years, and finally they decided, okay, we'll prosecute someone who's in the elites, in this case, Donald Trump. Now I'm asking MAGA, you guys think it's okay for these guys to go to prison, but then Trump and his team walk around scot-free? Is that justice? Doesn't look like it to me. Aida.
Well, I was thinking about what you were saying, what you just said, and I was like, isn't it always the way that supremacy works and oppression works, is that the people at the bottom always suffer the prices? Because you and I all know, we all know that they don't care about the people who follow them blindly. They are just numbers. They're the people who purchase their merchandise, the people who blindly follow them. They were telling these people not to get vaccinated. They were dying during COVID, but they were getting vaccinated. Nobody insults that base more than the people who they follow. Like, nobody insults them most. When it comes to law enforcement, they care about your life as long as you stay in line. Blue lives matter as long as you are in line with the agenda. And this whole idea about these people, being a cult, it's really like that's all they do, is they mobilize these people who are suffering and struggling, that are void of an education. They don't have access to, they have access to the information. They just don't know who to trust, who to believe, and they're being led astray. And they're the ones that are gonna go to jail. They're the ones that were crying, they were the ones that were out there believing the gospel that they have been fed, while those people who were in positions of power fled, while they were the ones that were there in the mix, in the melee. And it's just so disgusting what's happening, and it's really gross to see the way these people behave, because it's become normal, as you said, and that's the scariest part of it all. It's normal to behave like you don't have good sense.
And more to what Aida is saying is that she delineated the differences between, one of the differences certainly, between a cult and a movement, right? A movement, the people care about the people that are following them. In a cult, they couldn't care less about those people. It's about himself, and that's why so many of these people have been likened to cultists, because of just this. And so now we also have the policemen, right? The police officers in the Capitol and everywhere else that were listening to to this kid. Well, one of them, a U.S. Capitol Police officer, Harry Dunn, responded to the Quattrocchi situation yesterday, and this is what he did. He called him a failure. He said, "I hope Dylan Quattrocchi will take the time to comprehend that 4 members of Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police Department did die by a suicide, and that the efforts to stop the certification of duly elected President Biden failed in part because of their brave heroics. You are a failure. Those men will be remembered for service to their country, and you'll be remembered as the guy in the cheap suit during the failed insurrection." That's a Capitol Hill police officer, and that is the punctuation that this story needs. Is whatever we say, and Cenk, you're right. Like when this would have been punished in many different ways years ago, but Trump has changed that metric. But the bottom line is that 4 people died by suicide after this punk called them out on the floor and said, "You might as well." So it's just a terrible situation.
Yeah, one development on something we talk about often related to these January 6th rioters. So Trump raised hundreds of millions of dollars for legal defense and never gave a dime to any of them. So we were saying that for a couple of years here on the show, and finally it's getting picked up a little bit. And we're going to talk more about it later in the show. But Brian Kemp might have called Trump a scammer for that. And now on CNN today, they were discussing, oh yeah, Trump had a couple $100 million. How come he never used it? Oh my God, a lot of it is gone. I wonder where it is. Yeah, we all wonder where it is. And MAGA, that ain't our money, that's your money. And so he never gave it to these guys. And if you think, well, you know what, Trump shouldn't go to prison, and neither should these guys. These guys are wonderful human beings who threaten to murder people and break into the place, but still they're wonderful because they're patriots. Well, then how come Trump didn't help them? He didn't help them with a single dime of money out of the hundreds of millions that you gave him. And so now people are finally beginning to wonder and ask, where the hell is that money?
They're cattle, and unfortunately for, like you and I talk about this, Cenk, the fact that Americans don't have access to quality education is not all of them, and they don't have information that they need. But I will continue to say until somebody listens, nobody insults you more. Those people will band together for the sake of power and the sake of evil and the sake of getting whatever they can get done. But ultimately, they do not care about their base. And a lot of those people are suffering, and it's really sad. And in terms of law enforcement, coming from a community that has a very tense relationship with law enforcement, we're talking about people who are considered blue collar workers in this country. I'm talking about the people on the beat who are on the ground, and they don't care about those people either. Because if they cared about them, they would distribute funds so that they could have some mental health access and help. So that they're not answering the calls. They would really care about them, but they don't. Everybody is just a pawn in the game, and these rich people just keep playing their games, and everybody else is suffering, but they will follow them blindly. So can you really feel sorry for them?
All right, I'm gonna give the last word actually to one of our members. We love doing the show with members, by the way. Become a member by hitting the join button below the video on YouTube. Irie Fedora wrote in, MAGA equals my ass got arrested. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, Michael, what's the next story?
Magi, my ass got indicted, I guess, is also a big one that's coming up. So next we move on to weed. Obviously, it's got almost 4:20 Mountain Time, I guess. So we can go on to weed. A big change actually in marijuana policy handed down by the Biden administration. Health and Human Secretary Javier Becerra saying this on Wednesday. I can now share that following the data and science Science at HHS.gov has reported to POTUS's directive to me for the department to provide a scheduling recommendation for marijuana to the DEA. We've worked to ensure that a scientific evaluation be completed and shared expeditiously. And so to put that in lay people's terms, we will say that this is the best way to explain it. Specifically, and this is Jennifer Peltz at AP, the Federal Health and Human Services Department has recommended taking marijuana out of a category of drugs deemed to have, quote, no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. The agency advised moving pot from the Schedule 1 group to the less tightly regulated Schedule 3. The Schedule 3 drugs have a potential for abuse less than substances in Schedule 1 or 2, and abuse may lead to moderate or low physical dependence or high psychological dependence on those drugs. So, so marijuana now classified the same way as heroin, as ecstasy, as quaaludes, as LSD, all of those drugs that we know quite well. And the change in scheduling here, skipping Schedule 2, by the way, going right from 1 to 3, would still keep weed as a controlled substance, but some would be the same in group as ketamine, anabolic steroids, and some acetaminophen codeine combinations. While not legalizing the drug recreationally, federal government not doing that, this move would help reduce or potentially eliminate criminal penalties for possession. This would help to reduce or eliminate criminal penalties for possession, which we can talk about that a little bit. Schedule 3 drugs are subject to various rules that allow for some medical uses and for federal criminal prosecution of anyone who traffics in the drugs without permission, even under marijuana's current Schedule 1 status. Federal prosecution for simply possessing it are few. There were 145 federal sentencings in fiscal year 2021 for that crime, and as of 2022, no defendants were in prison for it. But most importantly, I think this is big for marijuana research, and that's what a lot of people have been fighting for: the ability to research its medical help. So because marijuana is Schedule 1, it's been very difficult to conduct authorized clinical studies that involve administering the drug. That has created something of a catch-22. Calls for more research, but barriers to doing it. Some scientists sometimes rely instead on people's own reports of their marijuana use, and we know how valuable those can be, Cenk.
Yeah, so look, guys, this is great news. Is it the end all be all? No. Let me explain important nuances here and say it is a little bit incremental, which is very Democratic, very Joe Biden. On the other hand, it is exactly what Joe Biden promised. So number one, moving it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 is a very good beginning, because then you could do research on it, and it affects them in terms of taxes, and it makes the businesses a lot more viable, because otherwise they couldn't deduct very normal costs like the cost of rent, etc., which is totally unfair. Every other business can, but they couldn't. So that moving it to Schedule 3 takes care of that as well. But they still cannot use the banking system because it is still technically illegal under federal law. And so that's their number one concern. And by the way, that's what leads to more crime, because then they have to deal with cash. And then when everyone in the planet knows they've got a lot of cash in the building, it creates huge security issues. So they've got to move away from that too. So the bottom line is it's still illegal at the federal level, and you can still be put in prison. As you saw there, it doesn't happen very often anymore, and Biden did a good job of pardoning some folks that were unjustly in prison there. Michael actually did a story for us a number of years back about one of the guys who was unjustly in prison. He was selling legal marijuana in California, and the feds didn't like a rap video he made, and so they put him in prison. And so that's still possible under this law. But to be fair to Joe Biden, he didn't say that he would deschedule marijuana. He said he would reschedule. He would move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. I don't think that's nearly enough. We nearly did a petition to do this, but we decided not to when we talked to almost every activist in the field who said moving into just Schedule 3 doesn't help that much. It really needs to be completely descheduled entirely. And so that's why we didn't bother doing a campaign on it. But Biden's promise was not to take it off the list. His promise was to do exactly this. So he's delivering on that. And so you got to give him credit for it. Aida.
I think it's interesting when you hear like all of the stuff you can and can't do with regards to marijuana. It just feels like they're the only ones that can do it. Everybody else is in trouble for doing what they're making money off of it. They are the biggest drug dealers. These are my views, not the views of anybody else. I feel like the biggest drug dealers are the ones that we see assembling themselves in government and these corporations. But I cry for the people who have been in jail for a very long time because of these charges. So I look forward to any steps that we take. All the Black and brown people that come from the communities that I come from that have been incarcerated and held. And so now they want props because they let some people go and they got a few people out. And look, guys, look what we're doing. I just think, good. I hope so, because I know a lot of people who health-wise have benefited from these studies that have to do with marijuana, especially in easing pain and agony and misery that they're dealing with daily when they are dealing with severe illnesses. So I don't give props to the government for doing stuff that they're supposed to be doing. I'm just sitting over here thinking like it's about time.
Well, I do think right. It is about time, but whenever that time comes, Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill. It should have happened years and years before. Yeah. When he pushed it through, said he was going to do it, it was done. Props to Lyndon Johnson. So I think that and I'm not equating the two, obviously, but this is, as Cenk said, something that Biden promised. And one of the other parts of this is, and I think we talked about it, and it's not lost on anyone, but it deserves reiteration, is that it can't be descheduled without going to Schedule 3, meaning that the research has to happen to support taking it off the schedule entirely. And this facilitating of that research and the science will undoubtedly, and the way that things are trending, and that's the biggest part of it, is you get momentum in a direction for any kind of change. It's clearly going in that direction, whether it's incremental or not. This is what has to happen according to government standards. And they also are going to be doing research on something they haven't been able to research. And that, to me, is quite important in this whole thing. And so it resonates with people. It resonates on Capitol Hill. Here's Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. He responded with high hopes about this in talking about HHS. He said HHS has done the right thing. The DEA should now follow through on this important step to greatly reduce the harm caused by draconian marijuana laws. And those laws have been on the books, but changing them is part of the process of making things better. And more to the Biden administration on things that are kind of wedge issue-y, and guns. The Biden administration seems to be trying to make an impression on voters, both with marijuana, and they also supported a new gun safety law just yesterday. The Biden administration on Thursday proposed a rule intended to require people selling firearms at gun shows and on the internet to conduct background checks on potential buyers in an effort to curb the so-called gun show loophole. And to that point, you had a foreign national in North Carolina who they don't know how he got his gun as a foreign national, but presumably at a gun show because he was able to, and he's the man who killed his professor at UNC earlier this week. Under this new rule unveiled by the Justice Department, some private sellers may no longer fall within the background check exception, with the department saying the guidance identifies examples of conduct that would in certain circumstances be presumed to qualify as engaging in the business of dealing in firearms, and thus to require a federal firearms license, which would mean the seller must run background checks ahead of sales. So in one fell swoop, or in two tiny swoops, you have the president fulfilling a promise on changing the schedule of marijuana and closing the gun show loophole. And this, heading into an election year, is good stuff for an administration.
Yeah, so this one is even smaller than the rescheduling of marijuana, but hey, it's better than nothing. Unfortunately, sometimes Democratic Party's slogan appears to be better than nothing, but it is. The Republicans would go in the opposite direction.
Quite big, Cenk. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but closing the gun show loophole has been something that the people who have been fighting against guns for quite a long time have said they want to do. They've been pushed back. They haven't been able to get people on board. Now you have a White House doing it. I think that's bigger than you're giving it credit for being.
Universal background checks polls at 97%. This is
exactly.
They haven't done that. This is under that. I hear you. I'm saying it's better than nothing, and it's this literally the smallest thing we could ask for, but it got done. which it wouldn't have gotten done under a Republican. They would have gone in the wrong direction. So look, and descheduling, I would have done it on day one. But Biden is a cautious guy. He's a very, very, very slow guy, very incremental, pretty conservative. But hey, he's headed in the direction of taking actions. So I don't want to poo-poo all of this. What I want to tell you is it really is better than nothing. It really is some degree of progress. Is it as much progress as we want? No, but hey, he's up and at 'em and he's doing things. Even though there's a Republican House. Okay, I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it. Last thing for me is why? Why is he doing this? Especially on the marijuana issue. Is it because he made a promise and so he's an honest guy that sticks to his promises? No, he also made a promise about the public option and he didn't do a goddamn thing about it. And I could list you another dozen things that he promised and didn't do anything about. Now there's two reasons why they're moving on marijuana. One is they saw that young voters made all the difference in the 2020 election and 2022 election. They're like, well, what do young people like? Oh, they like marijuana. We found out, they liked it 20 years ago? Oh, I didn't know that. So they're finally moving on that. And then second of all, now that marijuana's turned into a business with 38 states having legalized it, now they have power. And those businesses can hire lobbyists. And the minute you're a business, you're in business in Washington. So those two things have combined to move marijuana to Schedule 3. And don't worry, guys, it'll soon be perfectly legal and they'll deschedule it completely because those businesses now, especially with being treated as a normal business and they can take the tax deductions, will make more and more money and they will spend some of it lobbying and then they'll get exactly what they want.
Yeah, and I would dare to say that the person who went on the Breakfast Club and said that if you don't vote for him, you're not a black person, probably thinks that he's picking up a few votes within people of color as well when it comes to marijuana, being that you could say that in a public setting when you're talking about people of color. And Michael, I agree with you. I think steps forward are steps forward, and I believe that we should be, relieved. I mean, not happy, but relieved that we're taking some steps forward. Because a lot of people are suffering. I had a grandmother who died of cancer who could have used some alleviating on her way while she transitioned. And I think that it was important. She didn't have access and wouldn't have access because she didn't have privilege and she didn't have access. But I think, I think we have to be able to hold our government accountable. I don't want to live in a cynical state constantly. So I do believe that taking a step forward, but understanding why these people are doing these things and why they happen when the elections are rolling around, and then when the elections are not rolling around, the people stay in suffering. It's just, we want change. And big props to the young people who are really pushing these movements and are making themselves seen by showing up and voting and making a difference, because I think we got to give them credit for showing up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got to say one last thing. So look, our job is honest reporting. So I'm giving you the full context, right? Of what he promised, what he didn't promise, what we can do, what we can't do. The only thing that bothers me is when news organizations call that gun bill or the gun action major gun reform. And I saw that in a number of articles. Bring it down with major reform. Now, having said that, this story is not a net negative. Like, people usually just put whatever lens they want on it. And if you hate Biden, you want to say it's not enough, so it's a net negative. No, this is a net positive. He has moved us in the right direction. We would like to go further in that direction. And it's not just us, it's the great majority of the American people, both on marijuana and guns. And we wish they would move faster. But overall today, definitely a good day. And I'm glad that they are taking positive action going forward on these issues.
I'll take the last word, which is closing the gun show loophole is major. And now we can go to a break if that's what you want to do, Cenk, but I just needed the last word there.
Okay, God bless. Everybody gets their word here. All right, more fun stories for you when we come back. Back on TYT, Cenk, Michael, Aida with you guys, but also Sonny Dormevi, PC hippie, Diana, Leah, and pair of socks. So we even got a pair of socks, man. You can't beat the TYT Army. So thank you guys for joining. We do the show with the members. We love you guys. You make this possible. And PC Hippie, thank you for joining at the higher levels. That makes it possible for us to give folks membership at $4.99 a month, which basically a cup of coffee. Hit the join button below the video on YouTube or go to tyt.com/join to join them. Michael, what's the next story?
When you have a pair of socks, automatically that means you're only going to have one eventually. So that's the sad thing about a pair of socks. We have Jared Kushner back in the news, and it couldn't happen sooner. Take a listen.
We know that Kushner pocketed $2 billion and a $25 million a year management fee from the Saudi government, and the UAE and the Qatar government have also kicked in money. So there's more than $3 billion in there. We want to be able to reconstruct what exactly those countries got out of it.
And yesterday, Congressman Raskin, who is the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee, sent an official letter requesting that his chairman, James Comer of Kentucky, finally subpoena Kushner for his sketchy dealings with Saudi Arabia. Kushner, as you may recall, founded a private equity firm called Affinity Partners. I love those names. Just after leaving the White House, thanks in large part to huge investments from the Saudi government and other Gulf nations. He reportedly took in just a little bit of money, $2 billion from a sovereign wealth fund chaired by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He had been tasked with managing Middle Eastern policy, you'll recall, and worked closely with MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, throughout Trump's administration. Remember, he was the guy best suited in this country to deal with that. A report from The Intercept during the Trump years found that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, bragged about having Kushner in his pocket. Kushner was also deeply involved in a $110 billion weapons sale to Saudi Arabia in 2017. And because of those ties, which many would call shady, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are renewing their effort to obtain Affinity Partners documents and subpoena Kushner, which they've been trying to do for over a year now. Earlier this month, keep this in mind, Democrats have been trying to do it for over a year. Even Republicans, James Comer said Kushner crossed the line of ethics, but is now shooting down Raskin's idea to request for an inquiry. Jamie Raskin isn't going quietly, though. In his interviews with Chris Hayes, he explained again why Kushner's cozy relationship with the Saudis should be investigated.
Remember that the Saudi Arabian sovereign wealth fund advisors recommended against giving that money to Jared Kushner on the grounds that he was inexperienced and they were asking a ridiculous sum of money. And their advisors were overruled by the homicidal crown prince himself, Mohammed bin Salman, who of course had been essentially bailed out of his situation that he'd gotten himself into when he ordered the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi back in 2018. So, the Trumps did a lot for them. And I think Donald Trump bragged about it, saying in essence, he saved the prince's posterior multiple times, and he wanted to continually remind him of that. Well, we know that Jared Kushner created a business the day after the Trump administration ended, and within a few months he had brought home billions of dollars from the Saudi government.
It's not just a business that he created, because Chris Hayes reminded Raskin that Kushner had pocketed so much money through these deals, and Raskin said it does sound a bit like a quid pro quo.
It's not just you get billions for your fund, but like the management fee that they're charging is a lot of money, and that's like basically direct income for the guy running it.
I mean, that looks like a straight up payoff to me, a quid pro quo. $25 million a year. I mean, like that's the interest you would have basically on a $500 million that he's, pocketing directly from Mohammed bin Salman, who was obviously expressing his gratitude to the Trump administration for going there first in Trump's foreign travels, for the cover up of the assassination of Khashoggi, for tilting towards Saudi Arabia, in the Yemen war, and on and on. The Saudis basically got whatever they wanted.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear Kushner and Trump benefited from that relationship with the Saudis, not just from bankrolling Jared's little equity fund or the money that's in his pockets now. A year after his presidency, Trump golf courses began hosting tournaments for the Saudi fund-backed Live Golf. Separately, the former president's family company, the Trump Organization, secured an agreement with a Saudi real estate company that plans to build a Trump hotel as part of a $4 billion golf resort in Oman. So there is a lot going on here, and it also forecasts, Cenk and Aida, to the idea that these investigations into previous administrations are just going to go on forever and ever, because once the Democrats, and I predict they will next year, take over the House again, you can see them going back to the Trump administration and looking into Jared Kushner, as they should. But it brings up the idea, when does that end as well?
Yeah, so a couple of really important things out of this. First of all, you get a specific number of $25 million a year that Jared Kushner is getting. I mean, we were saying that what Hunter Biden was getting from the Ukrainian gas board company was ridiculous, and it was. It wasn't anywhere near $25 million. And as I explained on yesterday's show, The Intercept broke a story with 3 sources explaining that national security community was irate at Jared Kushner. He took a presidential daily briefing. He knew who our allies in the Saudi government were and our sources in the Saudi government. He went to Saudi Arabia, had a meeting with MBS. A week later, MBS arrested all of his opponents, including our sources. And by the way, one of them was tortured to death. So this is as awful a scandal as you could possibly imagine. Now, I want you to imagine for a second if Obama had done this and one of Obama's kids did it, or the Clintons and Chelsea Clinton went and cut a deal with the Saudis. One of our sources get murdered. By the way, MBS also took billions of dollars from the people that he arrested. And then Chelsea sets up a $2 billion fund and she gets paid $25 million a year. Now, what do you think Republicans would have done? And how do you think they would have reacted? Imagine if Hunter Biden had gone and done a deal with the Saudis, they would have said, oh my God, radical Muslim terrorist, et cetera, et cetera. And Jared Kushner does it, and I guess Republicans are okay with corruption. This is the most obvious case of corruption I've ever seen. I can't thank Jamie Raskin enough for staying on this, for finally bringing attention to it, for putting a spotlight on it, and for going on TV and talking about Democrats. What's wrong with you guys? How hard was that? You go on MSNBC, they'll tell you every night, all night long, they don't care. There's no reason why the MSNBC wouldn't have you on. And you go on there and you say, hey, my kid, can you believe he took $25 million? And it becomes a national issue. They should have been doing this a long time ago, but it's okay. I'll take it. 2 more facts you should know. It's not just the $2 billion from the Saudis. He added to that with money that came from the UAE and Qatar as well. They finally settled their beef with Qatar. And so that fund is now worth up to, sources say, about $3 billion. And the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia, the people who run it, advised the government of Saudi Arabia, do not do this deal with Jared Kushner. He does not have a good track record of investment, and he doesn't have nearly enough experience. And MBS overruled them and said, yeah, trust me, we got to do this deal with Jared Kushner. And so they did it against the advice and counsel of their actual financial experts. Aida.
You know, I'm not going to talk about something that I'm not well versed in, but I do know that what's becoming very normal to Americans is we always talked about how corrupt politicians were. Now we're seeing it and it's being normalized, and it's just becoming part of our day, where every day we hear something crazy that the government has done. People in office, people surrounding the government, and it's just becoming normal. And because people are like, well, the government is corrupt, that's what they do. There's so many people suffering in this country. We don't have access to health care like we should. So many people who are unhoused throughout this country, and these people are throwing around money. Not to mention the way that Jamal Khashoggi's death was. It was just, they made a mockery of that man. That man was strangled, that man was dismembered. And it's just normal. It's become, I'm really concerned about the state of Americans. We consume all of this stuff and it's becoming normal and nobody is doing anything.
And Cenk, you said to imagine a situation where it happened in reverse. You don't have to imagine it. I mean, Hunter Biden, whether it's Saudi or China, it's the same idea, right? I mean, it's taking somebody and going after it. But what it does is it dulls the impact of how bad this Kushner stuff is, and how this Middle East peace plan that was basically paid for. I don't think there's a precedent for it in American history, and if there is, there's not one that rises much past this. It's really terrible.
Yeah, and so the allegations against Hunter Biden are nowhere near this level of money. Not within the ballpark of this guy. I mean, and I'm just talking about the allegations, let alone the fact that they have evidence that Hunter Biden's a cheesy dude who definitely capitalized on his name to get money from folks in businesses he has no expertise in. So denying that is crazy, okay? But they have no evidence connecting him to Joe Biden. And I gotta remind you, Jared Kushner is not just Donald Trump's son-in-law. He ran our Middle East policy. In fact, Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State at the time, said, I don't even know who the Secretary of State is anymore, because he thought Jared Kushner had totally taken over the job. And then he uses it to benefit himself. And if you remember, the national security community at one point got so furious with Kushner that they denied him security clearance. It is very likely that it was over this event. And so this is a guy who is a borderline traitor if these allegations are true. And he did it for money and greed. And Republicans, look, a lot of times I attack Republicans like no one else does, right? But I also give them credit, the Republican voters, on things they deserve credit on. And they really genuinely hate corruption. But then when it comes to Trump, they're like, except Trump and his family members were totally okay with over the top, crazy, terrible corruption as long as it's Trump. And if you say that, then you don't hate corruption. You just want to punish the other guys and don't mind at all that your guys are getting totally unjustly enriched at our expense. So make up your mind, MAGA. Do you hate corruption or don't you?
Right, and do you hate the Trump hotel and the fact that the Secret Service paid over what they generally pay to stay in the Trump hotel? And do you hate Live Golf going to these Trump country clubs? And do you hate the fact that Trump now has a contract to build a resort? All of this because of Saudi Arabia. The emoluments clause is there for a reason. And if Trump, he's never going to be president again. But should he be? What happens to all of this again? I mean, it just gets replayed because he wasn't called out by the people who are put in power to call him out. That Trump hotel thing, not as bad as Jared Kushner taking all this money because it didn't impact policy, but it was basically the biggest, most glaring violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution.
And guys, what do we look to? One last quick thing here: $4 billion golf course in Oman, in the middle of the desert, and they're going to spend $4 billion on a golf course. No, that's an enterprise to skim off the top to whoever needed something, right? Whoever did them a favor. That's my guess. I don't know how you build a $4 billion golf course. You could build 40 golf courses at that price. So there's something terribly, terribly corrupt going on in the Gulf. which again, by the way, are radical fundamentalist Muslim theocracies. But apparently Republicans are cool with that too now these days. The Saudi government's ideology is indistinguishable from ISIS's. They have the same exact, there's someone, today there was a news broke that someone criticized MBS, that's the crown prince we've been talking about, the one that ordered the decapitation of an American journalist. They're going to execute someone who has 10 Twitter followers because he criticized MBS. They're going to murder him. And that's the deal. Those are the guys that Trump and Kushner are making deal after deal with. And now MAGA's proud about that? You guys gotta make up your mind entirely. Are you honest and earnest about anything? Do you really hate corruption? Or should I take back everything I ever said about that?
Yeah. We need to stop referring to them as a family and they're a crime syndicate. Like, we need to really start talking about these people and calling them what they are. They're criminals. They don't care. They don't care about you. If you're watching this to hate on it, they don't care about you. They don't care that you don't have your diabetes medication. They don't care that you can't go to the doctor. All they care is about the almighty dollar. And they're gonna get it. It's really, really disgusting. And the fact that we are negotiating what's bad, what's worse, this is not as bad as this, is very indicative of how bad it is that we are now saying, hey, it's not that bad when you kill somebody with a knife than you do with a shotgun. It's all bad stuff. And we need to stop accepting this for ourselves because our country is really a joke.
Yeah, I hate that they've done that. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, a Republican tries to cure their problems with exorcism. If you exercise your office, and I don't mean jazzercise or Peloton, will it work? Will it cure you of the demons that plague you? We'll find out when we come back. Back on TYT, Cenk, Michael, and Aida with you guys, and also Neil Stark. Neil became an American hero by hitting that join button below the video on YouTube. We appreciate you, brother. Michael, what's next?
Oh, well, there are still exorcisms, it turns out, and where better to find them than at CPAC, where CPAC chair Matt Schlapp felt that, starting over, starting fresh, maybe as some of the kids saged the room, he wanted to go a step further, and he saw several of his staffers quit recently over, or at least threatened to quit, many of them, over dissatisfaction with his pay. So he hired a Catholic priest to evict satanic spirits by carrying out an exorcism, according to Daily Beast reporting. Schlapp said on an afternoon in spring 2022, CPAC employees at their offices in Alexandria, Virginia found themselves suddenly in the presence of a Catholic priest. The priest, sources said, sprinkled holy water around the CPAC premises and blessed all the staff regardless of their faith. As part of the rite, according to these people, the priest placed a medallion above doors in the offices and explained that it would help ward off evil spirits. Nothing about necks or twisting all the way around and staying in one place, an Exorcist movie allusion. You'll note also the Daily Beast earlier this week reporting on Matt Schlapp that he tried to settle the sexual harassment case against him that he denies, and the settlement was rejected. So it's maybe that was part of the exorcism as well. The employees who have quit have been gone for over a year now, but the talismans on the wall are still there. The Daily Beast obtained photos of one of them, which shows that it is Saint Benedict's medal with Saint Benedict being the patron saint of exorcisms, obviously. According to the Saint Benedict Center, there's a center for everything. The medal is a prayer of exorcism against Satan, a prayer for strength in time of temptation, a prayer for peace among ourselves and among the nations of the world, and a prayer of firm rejection of all that is evil. Sounds like I'm preaching. Multiple sources with knowledge of the event said that the rite included a prayer circle in Schlapp's office, which, if you know Matt Schlapp, is about as ridiculous a thing as you can imagine, which one person described as performative and inauthentic. You're kidding, like a show, this source said. As the priest made his way through the office, spritzing holy water room to room, employees nudged him towards Matt's office. This spokesperson said. The way he had treated junior employees, it seemed to us like he was the one who needed it the most. The general counsel of CPAC, David Safavian, also a devout Catholic, publicly acknowledged in an in-office exorcism earlier this year under circumstances similar to the 2022 event. So they did it again. Now that we've performed an exorcism on a recently vacated office, I'm enjoying my new private cigar lounge. Beats the heck out of the corner of the garage where I could get cell service. Kind of weird. Schlapp stands accused of making unwanted physical advances on 3 men in recent years, one of whom is suing him for sexual battery, and that's what I was talking about earlier, guys, is that the settlement he offered to something he denied was rejected. When the Schlapps got word that the Daily Beast was going to publish this story, they tried to get ahead of it by trashing the publication on X and calling it Satan's publication. Guys?
Yeah, that's probably the right answer. And as Satan, by the way, very on the nose. He's like, or let's call it the beast, like the mark of the beast.
Right.
And you know what? Let's just do it daily since we're Satan. Okay. But that really goes to the main point that I got out of this story. So look, do we know who Matt Schlapp is? Yes. Does he actually believe that there are demons flying around and that's what's causing him to pummel guys' crotches? I doubt it. Okay. So he probably thought, this will make the wife happy, and then I'll say, oh yeah, oh right, it was a demon inside me. No, yeah, that's what it was. And so he's now been accused of basically hitting on and sexually harassing or assaulting 3 different men. And so probably during the exorcism, he was thinking, you know what they say with guys with big horns. But I'm more curious what Mercedes Schlapp was thinking. She's the wife. She's also been sued for defamation in regards to the pummelee. But I bet she really believes it. And I bet a number of people in that room actually believed it. And guys, that's amazing. So look, I don't know how religious some of the folks in the audience are. And sorry if I'm gonna offend you folks who actually believe in exorcisms, right? But to the rest of us, there's no demons flying around that you can't see. And some guy sprinkling water from the local water fountain isn't going to make the demons go and freak out and run away. Like really, but in her mind, there's some chance that she really believes that. That like, you have to imagine that it's like a theater in her mind of like demons running around and Satan's got a plot and her and her husband are the hero of this action movie and they're like dun 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 and they're like, okay, what are we gonna do next with the demons? Take this holy water, take that holy water. And that's amazing to me that all that stuff is going on in their head when none of it is remotely true.
Well, I mean, that's what happens when you pray the gay away doesn't work. You got to go to the next level, and that's an exorcism. But kudos to them for acknowledging that the evil that dwells amongst them, and that they are trying to figure out a way to get rid of it. And it's also, these are people who don't believe that people are born gay, and they're repressed. And you have this man going out, and being gay does not mean that you're a predator, because that's separately. But the fact that he's preying on men is indicative of his fight within. But these people don't believe that you're born that way. Remember, they believe that teachers are turning children gay and queer, and that the establishment, and that there's an agenda. It can't possibly be who you naturally are. I just think, props to them for trying to get rid of the evil amongst them. I think that they know that the evil dwells. They're putting the little, using Saint Benedict, they're using the priest. It all sounds just horrible, and I'm sure some people are trembling in fear just listening to this whole operation. The dog and pony show is a mess. It's a hot mess over there, and they know that there's something wrong with them, and they're trying to figure out what they can do to get rid of it.
Yeah, think about what Aida's saying, because the ostensible reason for the exorcism is a bunch of staffers quit because they were getting paid ridiculously low pay. So what, they were evil for asking for decent wages? Is that the conservative position now? If you ask for higher wages, you're so evil, we have to bring in an exorcist to exorcise the evil demons you left behind for wanting 45,000 instead of 40,000 a year. I don't know what the numbers were, but whatever the numbers were, that's the demon you're trying to. No, of course that's not why. They're trying to exercise the demons inside Matt Schlapp. But that's the point, guys. It's an excuse. Like, oh, I wasn't born gay. I'm not gay. Gay is evil, right? So it just obviously can't be me. A demon entered me. Dude, somebody entered you, but anyway. It ain't a demon.
The definition of a failed exorcism is when you perform an exorcism on Matt Schlapp's office, and then the next day Matt Schlapp shows up again. It's like, that didn't work.
You guys made me laugh today.
Okay, we're out of time. We got to end on that high note. Let's pull a Costanza and get out of here. All right, everybody check out a book on this panel. It's called Legitimate Kid. It's Aida Rodriguez's book. Thank you, Aida, for being on with us. Michael was also here. And
a reminder, you can buy that book. You can buy Aida's book at independent bookstores too. It doesn't have to be Amazon, even though there's free delivery. Independent booksellers would love to sell you that book, and they'll get it to you pretty quickly.
100%. Yes, and by the way, if you're trying to buy it from independent bookstores, in my case, tyt.com/justice, then you hit Bookshop. That's the one for independent booksellers, okay? Much love, guys. We got an amazing second hour coming up next. Stay right here. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.